Hey, so let's talk a little bit about relevance or staying relevant as a developer. Now, this is a really tricky one because we live in a fairly volatile environment as front-end developers or JavaScript developers, and for everybody else, and just as in politics, just as in fashion, whatever you're looking into, there are trends, and there are things that are more popular and there are things that are less popular, and your market value is based around what is popular. So as a programmer, when you think about relevance, you have to think about not only what do you think is fun, but also what are people looking for in the marketplace, what type of programming skills are they looking for. And to me, there are really only two types of developers who have probably the most stable portfolio that you can possibly have, and those are C# and Java developers. Now, excuse me. Once again, they're passed safely. Thank God for that. Wish they could do that with a little bit less of noise, but hey, the truck is massive, so I suppose it has to make a lot of noise. Anywho, so the reason why C# developers and Java developers, especially here in Gothenburg and probably in most of the world, are so stable on the marketplace is because these are two of the most standardized corporate languages. What do I mean by corporate language? Well, I mean that these technologies have been around for long enough, and there are tons of really big companies who are giants in the industry. Like most of the big companies use these technologies in one way or another because, when these companies were smaller and they were building their IT system, these were the languages of choice. So that's one thing to put on your list to what makes a programming language popular. The people who are using it. JavaScript is the most popular language in the world right now because there is such a massive amount of people using it for all their projects. But that's only one way to make something popular. If you go back into even older companies, such as here in Sweden, the banking systems, they use COBOL. That language has been used to, I don't think there's been a single greenfield project in COBOL for years, but it's still around because there are very large organizations who are invested in it. So my tip to you in terms of relevancy, if you do C# or Java, you don't even have to think about relevancy. It's the hands down the most stable thing you can learn. Now your value you can still, we're talking about relevancy here, remember that. So although you are going to be relevant, as if you choose one of these languages, you are also going to get into what I like to call complacency. And complacency is, in essence, to me, when it comes to programming, is that, I'm if you go out on YouTube right now and you search for something for Java developers, you're going to hit a lot of different videos, because I don't actually know how we got to this place where, for some reason, it's almost like to me it's almost a sickness, where there's a category of videos that are designed to teach Java developers how to do something else. Or rather, maybe I'm misinterpreting the intention behind these videos, but I've watched a lot of them, and there's 100 other videos that are moving much faster and they have no connection to specifics to whatever Java, because what does it matter if you're a Java developer or a developer, right? Or any other developer. But that's the way it is. There's a massive demand for Java developers, but it seems to me that the people who go into Java development usually, there are exceptions, but they are not the most innovative people as far as I can see. But you know, there are exceptions, of course. I'm not judging people for, you know, not wanting to go into the really fast-moving languages. Anywho, other things to consider when in terms of relevancy is, and this is especially, I want to touch on it in JavaScript because these are to me the two extremes. So you can choose a language that is really stable, like Java or C#, and you can choose a very volatile language where a lot of innovation and things are moving really quickly, such as JavaScript. Now, if you go into JavaScript, you have to either really, really, really love programming, or you have to be absolutely fucking crazy. Because nowhere else, or in no other language that you will work with, will things move as quickly as in JavaScript and be as affected by trends. So a few years ago, everybody got hyped up about Angular, and today it's all about React. And the people who learned Angular and became really good at that are now they're losing their market value, not because they're bad coders, but because it's not as popular anymore. And I don't know why this is. I actually had this argument with my colleague Mark just yesterday about this thing. I was at a job interview and I was talking to this front-end guy about a job there, and I got like my rule of thumb is that if a technical person starts talking to me more about work processes and like different types of you know, keywords for the he's focused more about on the business, and he's a technical person, then I distrust him immediately. I assume very quickly that I have to now figure out if he's good or bad, because in my experience, the best programmers, they're technical people. They're interested in tech. They have an interest in programming. They don't start talking about their golf career for half an hour and like all these other irrelevant things to the situation. And I said and done, I asked him, I have a few standardized questions that I ask my colleagues, and you should have these too if you're looking to find a place, because trust me, like finding a good job as a programmer, if you're really interested in what you're doing, it's like finding a shampoo bottle or a protein supplement. Everybody is selling you the same thing, so you have to read between the lines. You have to figure out what's working. And my standardized questions are, in Node, for example, he was using Node. I asked him, so what are some of your favorite new language features in the more recent versions of Node? And he couldn't answer me. He didn't even understand what I was saying. So I gave him a little bit of help and said, well, you know, the await and async interfaces and string interpolation, you know, that type of stuff, just anything like that. And he still said, no, I don't really have anything like that. And I said, okay. And then I told him, and then I presume that you're not keeping up to date with the new stuff that is happening in the community. And you know, he kind of, because I had to pull this out of him, and I think that's what made me a little bit disgruntled with him, because it was so, I got this distinct sensation that he was trying to hide the facts, because I think that he felt that, you know, my interest level is really, really high, and his is not. So it gets, you know, for him it gets a little bit embarrassing, of course, to sit there and say that, well, he's mainly working with like Bootstrap for his projects and really old versions. Like, you know, it's painful for him as well, because there's a clear mismatch between us anyway. So, and I told him that this is probably damaging your career. You know that, right? Like, I'm not saying that you have to think about these things all the time, but because Bootstrap was really popular a while back and it was really relevant, but today it's not relevant anymore. And my argument with my colleague Mark was basically that, you know, he got pissed off that in JavaScript it's like I think he basically thinks that we're all spoiled children who think that, you know, everything should be a greenfield project and we want to work with exactly the right type of technology and all that. And just to a degree that is true. I mean, I told them, I mean, more like, if you're picking a job and you have multiple choices, wouldn't you pick the thing that interests you the most? For me, it's tech. Some people go for salaries. Some people go for job stability and working environments and benefits and all that stuff. And I told them that it's not like the JavaScript people want. I mean, there's a term called JavaScript fatigue, and it's really relevant to our situation. Because the way that the industry thinks about JavaScript and the community and all the hypes around everything, you're pretty much forced into this situation. Because if you start learning, let's say you start using Bootstrap a lot now, odds are that you will spend, let's say you spend 2 years learning it, and then you get to your next job interview, and in essence what's going to happen is that your interviewer is going to judge you based on the most relevant things that you have been doing. And what I'm trying to say here is that you're getting into a situation where you are losing your negotiation. Like you're not as relevant for the company because they are probably using something more modern. And or rather, even if they're not using something as modern, they're looking for people who know that stuff. And it's like a vicious cycle. Like the people who are hiring want the latest and greatest, but they're not working necessarily. They're not using that technology, and so you have to learn it. And then people who promote these things sell in the idea that you need to start using the more modern stuff, and then the companies want that, and then you start migrating over. So it just becomes crazy. I mean, I mean, I can understand my colleague Mark, who comes from these more stable server-side languages, where, you know, you make like this language doesn't really change all that much over years and years and years, but that's just not the case in JavaScript. So in terms of relevancy, if you want to be relevant as a JavaScript programmer, I warn you, because you are going to have to work really, really hard to do that. It's going to be a continuous catch-up process for you. I can give you some tips that's going to help you. You should subscribe to changelog weekly, you should subscribe to Node weekly, you should subscribe to CSS Tricks. Those are 3 very good newsletters for getting the big things. And you should also, of course, make sure that you're subscribing to different like videos and tutorials and all that stuff on YouTube. That's going to help you a long way. And it's not like you have to spend every single moment learning new things about JavaScript, because it doesn't move that fast. But it does move fast enough that in a few months something can come along and you might have to look into it. So that's the other extreme of the spectrum, that you're working as a front-end developer. It requires a lot of time. It does. And then you have like everything in between, which is mostly server-side languages such as PHP and, like, you know, all those things. And then you have system-level languages like C and C++. They're also fairly stable. And yeah, I think that it's really only in JavaScript where things are that volatile. So that's good. Anywho, so relevancy is an important thing. So remember that as you progress through your career, people are looking at the things you used to do, and they're looking even more so at the things you have done recently. So if you want to have a high market value, it's important for you to know what is popular with the main player or in the marketplace. It's simply that it's that easy. And you can go against the stream. I mean, if you want to be a Haskell developer, you can probably be a Haskell developer, but your market value is going to be extremely low. So think about these things when you're asking yourself, okay, what's the next thing for me? What am I going to learn next? Personally, I'm looking into Scala because from my perspective, this like functional programming paradigm seems to pick up more and more pace. So I think that if you, like for me, I mean, I already know functional programming and I know a lot about JavaScript, which means that if I get really good at this typed server-side language, that in this case it's based on Java, that's going to increase my market value by a lot, and it's also going to be a really great learning opportunity for me. So, because like if you want to talk about relevancy, I don't think anybody has a higher market value than a really good full stack developer who can do both server side and front end in about equal measures in skill. Or as my colleague Mark likes to say, a full stack developer is a person who can fuck up code at all levels of the application.